Hello, baby. Bing bong, the witch is alive.
Shit, I guess we gotta tell the Munchkins then. This is like really bad news for them.
Yeah, what about the Bad News Bears?
They're a baseball team. They don't have to worry about witches. There's no magic in baseball.
So
It's
I
one of the
was
rules.
obviously. I mean, unless
Yeah.
you're in the magical baseball emporium,
Where's that?
Hogsmeade.
Oh shit. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't know that they played baseball across the pond, but I
Well,
guess in Harry Potter land, it's
Yeah.
so topsy turvy over there that they're like, "Oh, footy? No, that's a Muggle sport. We play baseball."
Yeah,
It's ironic that the rule is that there's no magic in baseball because baseball, as we know, was invented by wizards.
Wizard Kelly.
It was Wizard Kelly, and he said, "Okay, well, this is the one. This is when we show off our non-magical prowess," and somehow Muggles picked it up. This is all canon, according to J.K. Rowling. She just tweeted this.
Yeah, she's been saying I hate transgender people, and also, by the way, did you know that
Wizards invented baseball?
Yeah, exactly. Surf and turf, apparently.
Yeah. And then she said that the baseball players all just shit themselves and magicked away the poo-poo.
Yeah, well, they. I see. The thing is, I mean, I know this is a Mezzer podcast, but I mean, eventually we're gonna have to start dealing with our thoughts on fandom because
Eventually, we are going to have to start dealing with this, guys.
Eventually,
it's
yeah.
something we've been putting off.
But so she says that she vanished, like you vanish away, the poop, right?
Or
And
pee.
I don't know like the excuse me, maybe I should vanish away this phlegm in my throat.
But a wizard could do that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I never went to whatever the American school is. But anyway, does vanishing like disintegrate it? Oh,
Where,
my
like,
God.
are you asking where does it get sent to? Like,
Well,
is there,
yeah,
like,
that's what I'm saying.
It goes to the poop dimension.
Yeah, it's like because it's like what's the difference between that and like blasting it? like
I mean,
or-
maybe they could. It could just be like they teleport it to just like a hole in the ground. Like there's just like a big hole like buried deep under Hogwarts.
So they would have to come up with septic tanks. Like
Yeah,
they
I
would
mean,
have to have,
it's magical septic tanks.
yeah. Well, as we've said before, and I think we said this in our episode on Fantastic Beasts, it's like at what point does magical technology diverge from regular technology? Because in Fantastic Beasts, everything looks pretty similar to each other, but then at some point, like the wizards start to just become weird and wacky, and then
And then they don't know what like rubber ducks are, and I'm like, I don't understand how a magician can't look at a rubber duck and not get it. This
maybe-
is my biggest problem with the Harry Potter universe.
yeah, well,
And
maybe-
J.K. Rowling, actually, this is, I think, the biggest issue with her, is that she wrote Ron Weasley's dad to not understand what ducks are. I haven't heard anything that she's done lately, so I think that's the worst thing that she's done.
I mean, what about the cursed child?
Oh, do you mean Adolf Hitler?
Yeah, I'm reading a book about him actually.
Yeah.
But welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm gonna say cold open over like I normally do.
Yeah, that's the little button on our Harry Potter sketch was Adolf Hitler. Just how... That's when Eddie sketched. This is a little
password is-
improv tip for everybody. If you don't know where a sketch is going, you could just say that, and the audience will laugh.
Anyway, I'm assuming you're laughing right now, Kiyoshi.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you because we know you love this. But welcome to Style and Direction, a menswear podcast without the
Believe it or
stuffiness.
not,
Yeah, Ripley.
we are a menswear content. We are a menswear content. We're a menswear podcast.
We are a menswear content. I don't know who that character is.
Wait, how about this?
Yeah.
Menswear continent. We got to start fundraising for this.
Wait, hold on. Like a Pangea of menswear?
No, we're gonna like buy the cheapest continent, probably like Australia or Antarctica, and then we're just gonna all the menswear guys can move there. It'll be like
one
utopia.
It'll be that one the rooms you were talking about, right? It'll be one big constant-sized room.
Well,
where
I mean,
everyone
the
will know
thing
your
is, there
content.
is only going to be one room.
What's the name of it?
the menswear room.
Okay.
And so you're like living there all the time, and it's just like it's essentially a continent, but everyone has to stay in like a big open air like warehouse or airplane hangar, perhaps, if we get enough people.
Okay.
And then they just stay there forever, and then you can change clothes. Of
Well,
course,
technically, what about this? If there was a door to the entrance, wouldn't that make the whole continent a room?
I think
like-
we're onto something.
Yeah, like Jurassic Park has that big gate, and you just enter the one room of Jurassic Park.
So it should be called Jurassic Room.
Well, so the first one is Jurassic Park. The second trilogy is Jurassic World. The third
Yeah.
trilogy is Jurassic Room.
It's Jurassic Room.
Actually, that's scarier. Imagining being
and do you know the fourth
in a room.
trilogy?
What?
Adolf Hitler.
Jurassic Hitler?
Jurassic Hitler.
This is the most Hitler jokes we've ever had.
It's such a hacky thing. I'm genuinely embarrassed by it, everybody. So, but that's okay.
If that makes
You
feel any
brick
better,
fits
we're
sometimes,
embarrassed.
and you brick jokes.
Oh, what about houses?
I break houses. I hear you paint houses.
Alright, if you bleed. Do you?
Oh, you will. We just okay. We're just doing more call and response. Let's get into the topic.
Okay. Call and response. Well, hey, talk about call and response. I'm Ethan M. Wong. I think
I'm Spencer
did I say that?
Oddie.
Yeah. And today we are talking about kind of,
Talking.
I don't. Yeah, we're talking about something. Did you say something?
No, I said talking. We're talking about
Oh,
talking.
See, we're talking about talking. We've actually had a stream about this before, which was kind of like our friend Chuck wrote an essay or like a little post in MFA about like how people should talk about menswear, or clothing. About like maybe don't use the word homeless or whatever. Don't say this is high quality when that word kind of means nothing nowadays. And so this is kind of inspired by that. It's kind of inspired by the essay I wrote about who I write the blog for. And this is also just something that I think Spencer and I should just talk about because we talk about menswear a lot. And so we're going to talk about how we talk about it.
And we do get questions about a lot of the phrases and terms that we use because we tend to use them all pretty vaguely and interchangeably. I think, we've seen Berkeley Breathes kind of pointed this out, like with regards to your blog, I guess, in his big response. And I think that on the podcast, we're guilty of that as well. But it's also hard because, fashion is such a subjective, and I've said this so many times, like visual thing that it's really hard to like just talk about it. It's much easier. I wish podcasts were advanced enough where I could say, here, let me show you, and then you see something in your brain.
Okay, I was going to say, if you said eyes, I feel like you're describing a video.
Well, no, see, we could do video content right now, but I really just want brain beaming technology. So I need Mark Zuckerberg to finish up on this. I need Gabe Newell to work on this so I can like beam a texture to your brain.
Well, you know who did figure that out?
Who?
Colonel Irina Spalko, Lenin's
girl. So we just gotta get the crystal skulls, which we know where they are from the movie. They're underneath that pyramid.
Us thinking your thoughts for you. I forgot what her whole spiel was. Yeah.
And then she got all the knowledge at the end, and it seemed like it was like pretty cool for her.
Yeah, she was like, "Whoa, hopsack! Whoa!" And then
she was just seeing all the textures at once, and that's what caused her fucking head to explode in light or whatever.
Her eyes like flame out like General Grievous.
When we run out of topics, eventually we are going to do our Indiana Jones miniseries.
That's right. I would love it. Hey, the thing is, you guys are locked in. You guys need to love us
you are. By the way, you're locked in. You are forced to continue listening to us.
That's right.
So, if you ever stop at any point, I'm going to call the cops.
They're coming for you. We're going to SWAT you guys. It's a joke if the SWAT people are listening. But yeah, what Spencer says is right. I mean, we're pretty vague. We use terms interchangeably because, Spencer and I don't really have a career in menswear. Like, we are not journalists. I know Spencer is studying journalism. I am not a style writer. I'm not in the same vein as...
I'm not studying style journalism, I should say. I don't really like style writing.
Yeah. And so Spencer and I, we've also, as I wrote in the essay about who I write the blog for, not like neither of us want to be like an authority or considered like a true style authority like Bruce Boyer. Like we don't really have a plan to write a book, and so the way we talk is kind of like our how we feel about menswear. It just changes all the time.
Well, because I think the thing is like with we don't really want to be a menswear authority because we don't think everyone should dress like us. We understand that most people don't want to dress like us, and frankly, we don't. I mean, we don't want everyone to dress like us.
Yeah, look at the Discord I had Saturday. Like literally, outside of maybe Nguyen and John, no one really wears a tie, and it's fine. You know, like it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's like I always find it difficult when friends ask me for like advice on purchasing because I will just always recommend like the weirdo like vintage thing. Like
exactly.
It's just what I like, and I don't expect everyone else to be into the same things. So
Yeah.
That's why I don't like prescribing
exactly
things necessarily.
And so over the year, like, you know, and again, we've always had this, like, even like when people ask us about like vintage back in the day, now people ask us for contemporary stuff. We've been pretty like kind of loosey goosey with the words we use to talk about, or the phrases that we use to talk about menswear. And it's also because like our styles have changed so much, like not just like in the past like 5 years or the 3 years that we've done the podcast, but like like even in the past year our style has changed a little bit, you know. And so we never really feel comfortable using hard terms or whatever. Like we are not like Bruce Boyer in that, you know, and maybe in the future we'll be a lot more specific with our speech. But I know that for me, as Spencer said, some of the biggest critiques I've ever gotten from people, doesn't matter if it's my family, doesn't matter if it's like another style guy, it's always that I am very vague. And I always say, it's kind of the point, because it's like it's hard to talk about this kind of stuff. You know, if I say menswear, that could mean something to so many different people. When I say menswear, it means something to me, even, like, you know, kind of just depends on the context, right? Like, and so
I mean, it's like, you know, it gets back to for us, like fashion, menswear. It's like a very like emotional, like feeling thing.
Yeah.
Where it's not as intellectual, where it's like, I mean, we like, I guess, categorizing things, but you know, we don't have like a dictionary that we keep, like, you know, that we reference.
That's actually kind of funny. I just want to say a little quick anecdote on that. I remember 3 bloggers. They're pretty, I'm not going to say their names, but they have said, like, I think either on their YouTube, it's like a public thing, but like they said on their YouTube, or like when they had like a little AMA thing about like, oh, what piece of content gets the most views? 3 people said, oh, it's always my glossary like post, like, oh, 3 roll 2 means this, or, you know, or bespoke means you know, it's a individual pattern cut for somebody different than made to measure, you know, like all these like menswear terms you should know, menswear glossary, you know, blah blah blah. Those are often like the biggest, like,
I think the closest thing that, I mean, that like when we worked on like the big guide to vintage menswear, I guess that might be the closest thing. But that's might be the closest thing. But even still, I feel like the point of that was still like, no, see it, like there's cool stuff. Like we just wanted to, like,
and then Esquire and the niche vintage too is kind of like, it's all in there. And especially like, you know, this is like the burden of knowledge that we've kind of talked about, where like once you know a lot about menswear, everything kind of just funnels together, you know. Like we can't say like when we say flares, you know, like obviously most people will think of like the 70s, but then for us, like, oh well, I mean, they're more collegiate flared pants, you know, like,
or
what
like,
about
you
that?
know, hey, like the bell bottom trousers, like from, like, you know, World War II that the Navy would wear, stuff like that.
Yeah, and so it's kind of tough, and that's why we use a lot of, like, you know, similar language, or we use other qualifiers to like differentiate those things. So it's never as, you know, as hardline as you want it to be. And on the subject of emotional dressing, I mean, I've always written like this. You know, I think I've always said that I write the same way that I talk. And so when I ramble, I ramble. When I don't have a point, I don't have a point. And so it kind of just translates all over. And I know a lot of people feel like menswear should have like hard answers, just like how people just want to know what the right thing to wear is. And we don't have that answer. Like it is kind of like by design, we do not want you to get to that stage, because clothing, as you said, it's very emotional. It's like what do you feel like wearing? Like nothing.
What me am I gonna be today?
Yeah, I got a closet full of me's.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like how we talked about in the post pandemic menswear thing, where nowadays everything looks the same. We're gonna be talking about that in a future episode. And the context is kind of like nothing really matters anymore, right? Like going to the bar, going to work is kind of like you can wear the same thing to both now, and so it doesn't really feel right to prescribe a certain thing or a certain
Yeah.
phrase or a mode of dress to something, other than letting your emotions guide you. So like that's kind
And
of why we feel this way.
as we've said before, the best first step for anyone getting into fashion is it's like figuring out what it is or who it is you want to look like. And so that's what most of our advice tends to lead to, rather than here is the perfect first suit to buy for like every beginner, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's also like not that serious. Like it's just
Really,
clothes
yeah,
at the end of the day.
that's really it.
And
All this stuff is silly.
yeah, and it's one of those things where we take refuge in audacity and absurdity. Like it's silly, but we still care about it. Like we realize how silly that is, and so we kind of lean into it. And it's kind of like, as Spencer said here, or wrote down here. It's like picking a movie that you like. Sometimes you know the reasons why you like it, and sometimes like I mean, by that I mean critically, and sometimes you just like the movie because it makes you feel good. And I think the best film people can do both, and kind of figure out like why this silly movie
Yeah,
is their
exactly.
favorite, and that's kind of how mentor works. And when you're talking about like stuff like that, even the way Spencer and I talk about movies, as you've heard at least like 4 or 5 times, we also don't talk about movies in a very like hardline critical way either. We disagree on movies all the time too, and we talk
Yeah.
about things that at the end of the day,
Well,
it
because
just
again,
matters on your.
for
Yeah.
me, the biggest thing with movies, like that I like to talk about, and that I think is lacking in mainstream Hollywood, is again just like the visuals and cinematography.
Yeah.
So it's hard to talk about movies sometimes too.
Yeah, see, it goes with all kinds of art. I mean, like, you even had that whole thing in the menswear, like the music and menswear essay that I wrote, where, like, it's one of the longest, my favorite essays I've ever written. But it's still hard to write about music, like to write about why a certain sound is nice to hear. Like it's like how do you say like, oh, this like sustained diminished chord blah 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 is like, oh, this is it, man. Like you can't really say it's like the best chord because there's plenty of other chords out there, and it also depends on the context around that particular chord, right? Like just because you can't just insert it anywhere and it'll be good. And so menswear is kind of the same way, where it's not straightforward. It doesn't always have to make sense. We always play and subvert things, and so when we talk about it, we hope that people don't just listen to the words. It's also about like the context, the visuals. This is why I post a lot of pictures in with it. It's like it all kind of goes together. Like the blog or even the podcast doesn't really make sense on its own. Like you need to, like with Star Wars or Harry Potter, you kind of have to get the entire picture, and then that starts to make more sense. And if you do want something that makes sense from the get-go, you probably don't like the blog or podcast very much.
And why are you listening?
And so, I thought we'd maybe talk a little bit about some of the other kind of big words that we've used, and kind of explain to people what we mean when we say them. I feel like that might be a good way of approaching this podcast episode, because we are a little bit vague, and if at this point, if you're still confused about what we consider things and what we consider to be good or bad, or what is tailored or what is hashtag menswear, maybe this will help you. Consider this our glossary episode,
Yeah.
or half a glossary episode. So the first thing I wrote down here is what we call good or bad, and this could be a topic in itself because this is super subjective.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I can go, kind of start off kind of quickly. So I think I tend to only describe something as bad when I think it's just like, I don't know, like in general, if someone has like a look that they're going for, I'm okay with it. But sometimes if there is a certain piece that just doesn't fit, is like incongruous with the rest of the outfit, or they're, you know, it's always if it's a whiff that I will call it bad. Never it's like, oh, this is, like clearly like a very like intentional choice that they were going for.
Yeah. That's I mean, I think a lot of the stuff is kind of based on our POV, like we said earlier, right? Like it's kind of, and we love to know what your POV is, so we judge it based on that, because it's like,
Exactly.
oh, if
Like
you,
for
yeah,
example, like I don't really like the like slim like mod, look on myself, but like I see people like, like Axel or
yeah,
whatever wear it, and I'm like, yeah, that looks really good. Again, I would try on a pair of slim pants and like, no, I'm not going to wear these, but I can see it on another person, and because I can tell that they have the kind of like knowledge and have put in the work and put in like the research to figure out what it is, like, how to get the look right,
yeah.
then I can appreciate it no matter what it is. But again, sometimes there are people, I don't know, sometimes I just see things and it seems like a mistake. Like, I'm trying to think of specific examples, but again, I'm being so damn
I mean,
vague. We're gonna have
it's
to have a fucking episode to explain this episode.
yeah, it's fine. We're gonna have one on what's good or bad later on. I mean, or maybe, I don't know, in the future, something like that. But it's like, hopefully as we go through these, maybe it teaches you how to think about menswear and how you talk about it as well. Because I think a lot of people who are beginners have very hard line definite, or they look for those things, as I said earlier. And what we find out, as Spencer literally just found out now, is that you can't. Sometimes you just can't do it. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of based on what you like. And I don't think you always have to say this is my opinion, because I feel like people should know that when you say it. But like, yeah, for me, good bad is heavily based on my POV, and it's what I consider to be good. Now, I like a lot of things, and I'm one of those kind of guys, and Spencer's the same way, where we kind of judge everything based on references. We can see how everything is interrelated. Like we see like a Wrangler Rancher pant, and we're like, oh, that's clearly like a late '60s chino with like a subtle flare, like the denim pocket, like the 5 pocket style, like a jean pocket style and everything like that. So like, it's for us, it's like, oh, we can't say it's bad because it looks 60s. It just looks 60s, and I think maybe before we would say it's bad, but now that we like the 60s, we're like, that's good.
Well, again, I think it's also just coming down to like you should have an open mind about fashion, even if you're into like super trad, super classic stuff. I think it's like super lame if you can't also appreciate, some like cool, like out there, like well designed tech wear or streetwear.
Yeah.
Again, it's nothing that I would wear, but I can look at it and appreciate like the construction and the designs and everything and the like singular like vision that went into it. But it's not something I would want in my closet.
Yeah, usually, and I think for us, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but the further it is from menswear, the better we can appreciate it, because sometimes, like, here's a good example of something I think is bad, is like the J. Crew Ludlow suit. I think is
Yeah,
bad.
I think
Like,
okay.
so
I think this is a good thread.
because it's like so for us, again, obviously, just because it's tailoring and menswear, and we'll get into those words in a second. Just because it's menswear doesn't mean that we automatically think it's good. And so with the Ludlow suit, when you look at it, and I guess this will be like a picture in the show notes,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's such a low button stance. It's also very short, so it has a very top heavy appearance that doesn't broaden out like a typical 30s jacket, because 30s jackets were cut shorter. The slim lapels make it just look awkward, And
I think maybe the key is like the closer you are to like my wheelhouse, the more harshly I tend to judge it.
Exactly.
Like like when we were in the vintage scene, like I would always like kind of be judgmental about the vintage outfits that I didn't deem cool. I guess I shouldn't been like I was in like 17 and had like 4 suits, so I guess I should have been talking. But like even still now, like I see like vintage workwear milsurf guys on my feed, and I'm pretty judgmental like when it comes to those looks.
Yeah.
I try not to be like, I'm never like an asshole or whatever, but if I see like an Instagram like workwear influencer guy who's wearing like a bunch of like pristine raw denim, even if it's from brands that I like, I can still think it looks lame.
Right. See, I think when we say good, bad, or lame or whatever, like, that just means that we just don't like it. And I think people searching for a reason, if we want to look at these terms and see what we can kind of pass on to other people, it's that, you can't find a defining I mean, it helps if you know why you don't like it, but like not everything can be correctable. Sometimes you just have to avoid it. Like you can't, like for us, you can't make this sounds so bad, but you can't make a Ludlow suit look good. Like you just like the obvious choice, and something I've as I've discussed before, is you just avoid it. Like the situation, like, oh, I'm gonna go to a party, but I only have suits, and it's a pool party. Don't go to that party, bro. There'll be other
Yeah.
parties. Like you can just avoid it. And so good bad stuff. It's super subjective. It's heavily based on our POV. Don't feel sad if I call an outfit bad and then all of a sudden you're like, that was a picture of me or something like that. Like, don't take it personally. My opinion also like doesn't matter. And also with all of these things, just because we define it this way doesn't mean it's the correct way to define it either. Like, we're probably wrong, I think, on some of this stuff too.
I mean, a lot of people listening probably think that bad means good and good means bad because of the wacky mainstream media.
That's right. Opposite day. So the next term we have is what we consider. Well, it's menswear, and I think as you heard from our Esquire episode and our niche vintage episode, this means like everything.
Well, yeah, because it's like even if you narrow it down to classic menswear, for like first of all you have to define classic and say, okay, classic means anything that men wore for more than 60 years or 50 years or something.
Yeah.
That's still like fucking a lot of shit,
Because it's like, because I think a lot of people try and use classic menswear to mean like, I want to wear a suit, but they don't want to say I want to wear a suit. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like a lot of other people do that too. And I think they're surprised when we call so much stuff like classic menswear. Like, to me, it involves tailoring, it involves Americana, it involves workwear. Maybe not milsurp, because milsurp is like military, but so it's not, by that I mean it's not civilian. Like, that could maybe be a big part of it.
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned the Esquire man episode, which came out a number of weeks ago, whatever this releases. But yeah, you scroll through them, you flip through the pages of Apparel Arts or whatever, and you'll see guys in like hunting jackets hanging out with guys in suits, or guys in like leather jackets, all this stuff, and it's. I think the simplest way is like if a man could conceivably have this in his wardrobe, like 50, 60 years ago, it could count as like classic menswear.
Yeah, and the thing is, remember, like jeans, slim jeans, boots, Danner boots, like down parkas, like corduroy pants, 5-pocket pants, ski jackets, like fucking like integral collar knitwear, all of this stuff is menswear. Like that's why we use it so broadly, because maybe the only updates that these things have had is like small details like the silhouette, or maybe like how they're worn, but almost everything that we consider to be menswear has like that kind of tailored classic root. I think the things that don't count as menswear are like literal athletic clothes, maybe. Like for menswear we think of,
so maybe like I feel like purpose designed, well, that's like too vague a term, but yeah, like athletic clothes, military surplus stuff that has like a very, I mean, I'm not saying that all athletes are troops, but it's like very non-civilian.
Do I support the athletes? No.
Yeah. This is why they're not standing for the flag, because they're troops somehow. I don't know how that works, but that's how it works. But no, I mean, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it's it's at least that's how
I guess you
do
could
it,
also
right?
say like athletic stuff is closer to a uniform than like
that
a sport
is
coat.
so apt. That is so good, because workwear is not a uniform, but military surplus is.
It is.
That is so good. Wow, we're figuring stuff out that weren't even on the notes that we had prepared for this.
There you go.
One thing I do want to say too, in addition to purpose-driven stuff, is that menswear is also, I use menswear also as a mode of dress, not just the pieces, but a mode of dress. So typically it is, the entire vibe is not purpose-driven. So for example, a hoodie technically to me is kind of menswear, because there's precedent for it, in Esquire and all this old stuff. But if you're wearing it with like track pants, I wouldn't consider that look a menswear look. Things can start to get more menswear as a spectrum. Like for example, like if the track pants were like vintage and then you wore it with like penny loafers and like like
Or
a
I
cool
feel like a matching like track suit you can wear that pretty menswear.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially if there's like wide ribbing or like collegiate stuff to it. Like oh, it gets more menswear. So menswear is not just like a genre of clothing, but a genre of how you wear it.
Menswear is a state of mind.
I mean, and that's where I like to live.
Yeah. Hey Jay-Z, I have a new song idea for you.
99 problems and menswear ain't one.
Sure, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. But yeah, so like that's kind of like one big way of how we talk about menswear. It's a very like like to I don't know, like a good example would be like if you wore like military fatigues and like a white t-shirt, like yeah, you can be military, but also that's also a menswear look. And it's more menswear like if you did that look but with penny loafers, because that's not a military look, that's more of a menswear
And
look.
if you did that with boots, it would be more military.
Exactly. So it's that hopefully this is showing you how we think about these things and how we what we consider to be like a menswear look. And the spoiler alert is a lot of it is menswear looks. So so up
And a
next,
lot of this, I mean,
yeah.
again, maybe we'll get into this in a future episode, but as I was talking about on the Discord, a lot of this gets down to knowing the history of the individual pieces in your wardrobe, which
Yes.
I think is a very valuable thing to learn. If you can learn the context of where and when your like pieces might have been worn, I feel like that makes it much easier to plan future outfits, figure out how to wear it, how to pair
Subvert
it, stuff like
or
that.
play or play
Yeah,
against,
exactly.
right? Or play with, I should say. Yeah, because like I said, like when you look at the Esquire one, like so many things that are weird, like Tyrolean shoes and whatever. It's like, oh no, people wanted you to wear these in the 30s. Like this is not a new thing, fucking wearing galoshes or like fisherman sandals with full cut trousers. That has been around for a long time. It's still menswear, so that's kind of the thing. So the next term we have here is tailoring. Now this I think is what Berkeley Breeds brought up, which is a totally fair thing.
Yeah.
Because this is a loaded term. Tailoring for me typically means, I guess I'm being broad here, something that has like drape and that also
something that is like meant to be like tailored specifically for your body. So even with like an off the rack garment,
yes, but it's
would,
also
like, okay.
Yeah, but I would say it's also has to approximate something that is for a suit, something that is sartorial. So like I wouldn't say military chinos are tailoring, but like khaki trousers with side tabs are tailoring. They can both be made of cotton twill, but they could both have a Gurkha closure. But it's like it's kind of like how the garment was made. Like you said, like it has to be involved. Like tailoring has to be a part of the process. Like I guess maybe mass produced is not the right term here, but like
well, I
don't know.
I kind of get where you're coming from. I feel like it could be less, I don't know, the production of the garment, but like rather how it is just supposed to fit you. How is it supposed to like mold your body? I guess.
Yeah.
The purpose behind it, because I mean, yeah, there's a difference between like just a sport coat and like I mean, yeah, obviously there's a difference between a sport coat and just like an unstructured like 3-pocket chore coat. There's something different there.
Right. And also tailoring, the certain details it has, just like with menswear or even how you wear it, will put you on a spectrum of how tailored it is to how not it is. Like I think to me, again, military surplus is not tailoring, but a a Drake's Games chino to me is more on the tailored aspect because of the hit. Like it's like Drake's is a tailoring brand. You can also call it a menswear brand, but like to me, it's more of a tailoring brand, at least by the roots. So the things that they make are tailoring compared to like like their. I mean, I don't know if I'd call their jungle jacket tailoring, but like a trouser, which is a little bit more nebulous and like what it could be used for, is more on the spectrum. It's more. On the spectrum.
How about it's on the spectrum? If you're into menswear, you're on the spectrum. So
The
are
tailored
we?
spectrum.
Are we counting safari jackets as tailoring?
Ooh.
Is that like the in between like a military jacket and a sport coat?
Well, I would say this: if it was, again, it depends on the context. A a safari jacket by Spear and McKay or Ascot Chang made from like a, like a quote tailored tailoring fabric like Holland and Sherry, wool or I don't know, fucking Dugdale linen. I don't even know if Dugdale makes linen. I'm sorry, British people. But like, like that stuff is more tailored than say like a literal like British surplus safari jacket, But the funny thing is that tailors did make those back in the World War II, so it's kind of like I'm just full of shit at this point,
I mean, yeah, a lot of like military dress uniform. I mean, I guess dress uniforms you could probably consider tailoring, although we wouldn't, like wear it. But like back in the day, and I'm sure still now, a lot of those were made by like civilian tailors overseas.
That's right. I mean, and technically, a tailor is someone who like makes clothes, so technically everything is tailoring. So I guess that's why we started to use more about how it looks, what it was used for, is kind of like the differentiator or the spectrum, I guess, of what it is. It's not like obviously when we say get it tailored, we mean go to a tailor. And get it fitted or whatever, and even also fit. That's also like a future episode, but like it does like having it be tailored doesn't mean that it should fit close to your body either. Like it should just fit you. It should fit you, whatever that means for your POV, right? Like
yeah, because I mean that's the other thing is like people we always say. I mean, I don't know if we always say this, but the common wisdom is that the most important thing in fashion, like the first step you should take is like getting quote unquote the right fit. But once again, I think that kind of oversimplifies the process in figuring out for you what the right fit is, because frankly, a lot of guys do not look really good in like super slim fit stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously that's kind of like, not really, it's like kind of, going away, the super slim look. But for so long, I would work, when I was working at Men's Warehouse or J. Crew, bigger guys would come in and they would want to get these like fucking like skinny pants with these jackets that they wanted to slim down, but like frankly, you can't like, hide if you're a bigger guy with a slim jacket. So what you would end up doing is you would have guys come in and say, I'm going to get the proper fit. And then they would look like a potato with two like toothpicks sticking out the bottom. Like, it just doesn't look good, even if that's what, like, like fucking, like, suitfashion.com said that's, the right fit.
Can someone please buy that URL, please?
Suitfashion.com.
Before we move on, I do want to say also, to add on to this, like, a tailoring is kind of like, the reason I use this word vaguely is to, like, show that things that are tailored, like a sport coat, can be used in non-business contexts, because usually I think when I say it, it's like I always use it like to approximate tailoring or using the themes of tailoring, and most of the time when I use that stuff, I'm referring to something casual, something rugged, something a little bit incongruous, and so the purposes of me using it is like to go, okay, well, that's the history of this thing, but let's take it out of that. So like it's more about, again, the vibes and the history or in the root of a garment rather than like, bespoke or like, like a business attire or something like that.
Yeah.
Because again, like my tailoring, I wear it not in the traditional tailoring sense. Like, we use sport coats with jeans, or we wear like wool trousers with a t-shirt or something like that. So it's it's still, again, whatever we want it to be. Speaking of whatever we want it to be, the next term is vintage, and this is a big one.
I mean, I feel like this is like a complaint that, like, I mean, not people have about us, but people have in general about the terms like vintage and antique and all this stuff. They're all very vague. I guess it doesn't really come up for most like normal people, but if you are into clothing and vintage clothing, it might be something worth talking about, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I think for us, we always use the term like golden era vintage or true vintage to differentiate stuff made by made like pre 1960s, because
I think our definition has probably shifted at this point to include stuff from like the 60s and 70s. Well, originally,
it's one of those things where, it's funny enough, as the blog and our styles change, our definitions of vintage have changed.
Well, also, I think as like time goes on, because it is getting harder and harder to find older stuff. So.
Right. I mean,
They're
so
not
I
making
think,
any new garments from the 1930s.
yeah. That's why I said when I wrote these notes down, and you'll read these also maybe in the essay I write along with this. Like, I think at the end of the day, it's about vintage is what is not currently made, and in terms of being original. So like we don't consider reproduction vintage, obviously, but we do consider like again like military chinos made in the 50s to be vintage because that particular thing is not being made anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
something could have a vintage aesthetic, but that is not the same thing as it itself being vintage.
Yes. I think that there should be some time in between it stops being in production. Like, and also this also depends on like a lot of vintage that we like, or at least stuff that we consider to be vintage, were brandless. And that's kind of more of like a 30s to 50s thing because that is the time before like big designers came out. Obviously you had like big haberdasheries like Solka, Oviatt, Macintosh or whatever. But those don't exist anymore. Those don't really exist.
Yeah,
And so
you don't really get the same kinds of people who like shop specifically for like, you know, brands in the vintage scene as you do in like, you know, just streetwear or I think like 80s 90s like reselling market.
exactly. So for us, like the garment should just be kind of more not plain, but you know, like they're agnostic because there wasn't a lot of differentiators. Like you could find like two suits from the 30s that are very similar but made by completely different people, as opposed to, you know, if it's a designer, there are things you are looking for specifically because that designer made them like that. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that there were stuff in the 30s, like you know, specific tailors. But like you know, one good example of this is like we don't call like a Drake's tie from 2015 vintage like that. Like that is like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago, but it's not really vintage because it's kind of like it feels weird to call like a designer brand vintage unless it's been like a long time too.
Yeah,
Like,
I guess in that case, you could call it like out of production, but yeah, calling
or
this like a
previous
vintage
season.
tie. Yeah, when it's like literally a couple years old, like doesn't seem right. And again, I think maybe our perspectives are warped because like we have shit that's like 100 years old in our closet.
Yes.
But
yeah.
it's you know it's not right to call it something that new vintage. It's just
Yeah,
not right.
it just doesn't feel like, you know, again, vintage has this kind of like anachronistic quality to the word. You know, it is out of time, it is odd, it is different. You know, it doesn't really work for something that can still fit in. Now, we do say something for like vintage Ralph Lauren because the aesthetic of Ralph Lauren has changed so much since like the 70s, 80s, or even the 90s. So, like same thing with Levi's. Vintage Levi's are also different than modern Levi's. And when we say modern Levi's, obviously there are LVCs that are supposed to be made just like they were back then. But we're talking about like the mainstream thing, right? Because like again,
Like the stuff that you
reproduction
can get at
is
like Macy's.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, the Levi's stay pressed. They don't make anymore. And that was something that was so common back then that now is hard to find and doesn't exist outside of a reproduction. So, like, yeah, like, we can say vintage Ralph Lauren for, like, 70s Ralph Lauren. But, like, I guess you could say vintage Purple Label, but, like, if you say, like, oh, Purple Label 2005, kind of tough, you know? I guess sneakers are kind of the same way because sneakers change so much too. Where like I think if there's, at the very least, if there's not enough, well, I was gonna say if there's not enough time, maybe that we get a pass from this, but I think the design has to be like radically different for it to
Yeah.
be considered vintage. Like I think like vintage New Balance, maybe, but like vintage Nike is probably a good example of this, where like literally like the vintage kill shots are, they look different than the modern kill shot, you know, or even like you know, like vintage Dunks have different material or whatever.
There has to be something like kind of different or unique or you know quote unquote special about it.
Yeah,
Due specifically like due to its age.
exactly.
It has to be
You know.
something that again you're not going to be able to find
Right.
currently.
Yeah, because it's like you know, like I wouldn't say like like a Western shirt made out of polyester is vintage, unless it was made in the 70s. But then I would say like you know like a rayon gabardine Western shirt would be way more vintage.
Yeah.
You know.
Why don't so I know that this is a little bit out of order for the outline, but why don't we quickly do golden era because I feel
Sure.
like that fits in a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
just with what we were just talking about. So we did mention golden era, I think, a little bit in our description, but
Yep.
that's like a vintage collector term. And usually vintage collectors use it to refer to the 1930s and 40s. That's how we use it generally. I think for me, my personal golden era is still like late 20s, early 30s. But yeah, it's just what we use to refer to like 1930s vintage.
Yeah, it is. I mean, technically, I think I think I use the same terms for that our friend Florian uses for his fantastic Tumblr you guys should follow, Golden Era
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Suits.tumblr.com. I think he says like suiting from the 1920s to 1940s or something like that. Like that's pretty good. I think some people expand to like 1927 to 1945, where like technically it's like the end of World War II, right before the Bold Era kind of takes place. So yeah, Golden Era is what we use. We also use the word True Vintage for stuff for this too. Also, True Vintage. To go back to what I said previously, is like that's what we kind of use for like the original thing of it. Like again, like a vintage stay pressed or like a LV, like a Levi's 60s cut jean, like that could be true vintage compared to like say an LVC model from like 5 years ago. Like that's kind of
Exactly.
vintage too, but it's not true vintage. It's not the original garment itself, you know.
And it's like again it's simply, you could like say it maybe a little bit simpler. It's the difference between something vintage inspired and something that is again like real vintage.
Exactly, and I think the thing to learn from this is all of the definition of vintage specifically for me and Spencer are based literally in how we collect and what we have done with vintage, and so one good thing to know is like, you know, the more you experience, the more honed in you are in what you like, can help you kind of figure out how to talk about menswear, you know, because it's not always as simple as just saying like, well, I like vintage, because the thing is for us, right, like we knew living in SoCal, a lot of people are into vintage. Like there are skaters who wear vintage clothing, there's so many different stuff, there's people who collect 60s 70s stuff, people who wear 20 stuff, people who wear like 1800
Or
stuff,
even
and so
people within the mainstream, like the vintage scene that we were hanging out with, almost everyone was doing like some variation of like, you know, like 30s or 40s, but still all of those guys still had like a different style or a different niche within that,
within
like,
the
you know,
niche, yeah.
30s or 40s style.
Yeah, so again, it's like, you know, it's like as mentioned at the top, where like the more you learn, the more you experience, it'll be easy. Like you might learn a lot of terms, and maybe things will also get nebulous for you, but at least you'll kind of know what you're talking about, and then you can just wear it, and people will go, "Oh yeah, that's it." Because if I told my friend Adam true vintage, he goes, "I don't know what that means," but I go, "Okay, look at this like 1930s jacket." He goes, "Oh yeah, that makes sense as a true vintage garment," you know, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I'm
Like
into
a
vintage."
double RL, like white, you know, like if you have like a double RL white double-breasted sport coat next to your like Palm Beach one,
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, you
People
can
will
like tell the
see
difference.
exactly, and so like yeah, that's kind of like a big thing, to, you know, kind of differentiate styles. And so on that note, let's talk a little bit about hashtag menswear.
Yep.
Now this is, I don't know if we'll have time to go to the other ones, but I'm glad we got to here because this is kind of like the big one. This one literally means whatever we want it to mean, because it encompasses two things.
I feel like hashtag menswear, just really quick, it's just like the chuggy for menswear. That's how we use it. It's
Yes.
just like menswear chuggy.
Right, and but the thing is, it goes. There's even for chuggy, like there's like different forms of chuggy, you know. And I hate saying that entire sentence.
I don't know that much. I've just read the New York Times thing.
Well,
I
no,
don't
okay.
know
Well,
this
again,
much
what I
about
mean here
chuggy
is, so
studies.
when we say
Am I
hashtag-
chuggy because of this?
yeah, you're chuggy. I think the reason I mentioned how nebulous hashtag menswear is because to me it means two things. Number one, it represents the blogger chic of 2009 and 2015, and that technically, because of the way the world works in social media, people have stayed in that. So whenever we see something like slim suits, the blogger blue navy suit, tan shoes, happy socks, slim ties, slim lapels, lapel pins, blah blah blah, that to me is hashtag menswear. Okay, like that's like a huge, like, you know, explore page, whatever. But because we are also in menswear, it also means anything that is like maybe not chuggy, but kind of like meme potential or very common. So like
Yeah.
hashtag menswear
All the,
could
like,
also, yeah,
All like the MFA, like basic bastard, like recommendations. I feel like could fit in there, but although it's gonna be different than like some of like the peacocking like hashtag menswear stuff.
Exactly, so like to me it's like, oh yeah, wear gray pants with a navy jacket. Like that's such a hashtag menswear look. It's because it's like capital, I think capital or hashtag capital M menswear. God, I hate that. It's like to me I feel like that's like the blogger look, but then hashtag menswear just means like whatever the catch-all menswear look is. It's kind of like taking that idea of like menswear that we said earlier, but kind of ascribing it to the literal community that is around it in the industry as well. So like again, like even if a thin belt is not hashtag menswear blogger chic, to us who see it happen literally with like everyone that we know is into it, Bryson's is doing it, Silver Ostrich or whatever, Tazwell, I don't know how to pronounce. I'm sorry, Jim Parker, for your brand. But it's like you see all this kind of stuff. They're wearing thin belts, so like it becomes like hashtag menswear. It's like hashtag food. I don't know. It's like whatever
Well,
becomes
it's
common
boiling
within
down,
menswear.
yeah, like boiling down whatever the like leading look or trends are and stuff like that. So as I talked about, I think on the stream last night, you
Not
could
last
definitely
night.
see, well, whenever last night for us, not last night for everybody else, unless I talk about it the night before we release this episode. Um, but I think, yeah, like you could say the tonal look that a lot of brands are doing, where it's like a brown
Yes.
suit with like a khaki shirt or whatever. That could be like hashtag menswear.
Yes, yeah, it's not a blogger look, but again, like I said in the thing, yeah, Salmon Amel, J Muser, like all those Scandinavian brands, they are doing that look, so it becomes hashtag menswear. Like for a little while, like I mean, you could even say that the throwing fits aesthetic is starting to become hashtag menswear because of how prominent the like 80s, 90s casual Seinfeld. Sopranos
Like
look
ALD kind of look,
yeah,
yeah.
ALD look is becoming more ingrained into the again the menswear tailored aesthetics of this community and industry. So it becomes hashtag menswear in that regard. And so yeah, it literally means whatever we want it to do. Like I think I try and differentiate it by saying like, oh, I think I now use explore page style now, or mall brand style, where it's hashtag menswear but a little bit on the lowbrow level,
Yeah.
like tan shoes is hashtag menswear but on the low end style. And then I would say maybe like Shell Cordovan is hashtag menswear on the highbrow end of it, where like that's like Shell Cordovan is definitely a meme for the hashtag menswear community, like Alan Edmonds or whatever, like all this kind of stuff. If it's any form of like a meme, or it's repeatable and defining of a very particular moment in this community and industry, it becomes hashtag menswear. So
So hashtag menswear can be good, can be bad. Just have to listen to the tone of our voice to figure it
yeah,
out.
well, I would say I think they're all. Maybe we sound.
I mean,
in my
it's like
head,
it's okay.
I think in my head it's bad, but and by bad again, defining
Maybe
that.
okay, maybe in that case, maybe just varying degrees of bad, because yeah, there's the like really slim postman blue suit with the happy socks and like tan loafers, which could be hashtag menswear, versus, as we said, something that's just kind of like a prevailing trend in the industry that's done by brands and people that we like. Even though like a lot of people are doing it, it could still be like,
Well, what's funny is, so something that's interesting is in the Simon Crompton essay about fuddy versus flashy, a good essay people should check out. But he talks about how menswear or classic menswear falls into the mid ground, or maybe it leans even more on the fuddy side. And then there's a picture of uh, Peter Zotolo, Urban Composition, wearing white pants, like a linen jacket, and a severely unbuttoned spread collar shirt. And like that, and again, Peter is a cool guy, really great style, really great photographer also. But that look to me is hashtag menswear, and even though it's good, I don't like that because of how it is a prevailing look. Like I think for us, we use it to also like maybe as a word of caution if you don't want those connotations, where like I think for me, like I wear a lot of, okay, a good example, I wear brown trousers and navy jackets to avoid the hashtag menswear look of gray trousers and a navy jacket. Like that's a good example. Like there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just being conscious of an aesthetic or connotations that maybe, I mean, obviously a lot of other people won't know, but but within the in crowd of again this industry and this community, you can either again play into it or not play into it. So that's kind of how hashtag menswear hashtag menswear is applied and how we do it. So maybe that is bad, or I guess varying degrees of bad. I don't know.
It's varying degrees of bad. It's just one of those things where you maybe don't want to look like the menswear meme. So as much as we talk about cosplay Drakes, cosplay Brycelands, maybe you should throw in an element of yourself in there, or throw in something from another brand you like, or whatever. It's just just if you don't want to be hashtag menswear, find something of your own that can make your look unique.
I mean, good examples I think are Nguyen and Philip. You know, really, I mean, we see them all in Saturday and the blog and everything, and they clearly, I mean, you can clearly see the inspiration, but there's always something there that makes it just a little bit different. You know, that makes it a lot more interesting, a lot more personal. Even though in my head, I definitely cosplay a lot more, but maybe people don't see it because it's just a lot more nuanced. Like, you know, it's not as easy as well, I mean, this applies to menswear too. Like, sometimes certain items are more hashtag menswear than others. Just like with some things are more vintage and some things are more tailored. You know, like again, like a silver belly fedora, I think, is starting to be a little bit more hashtag menswear, especially after The Rake started selling it on their website.
I'd just like to point out that I've had mine for like 3 years at this point. So.
I've had mine for like 6 years. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, I remember it's one of the first things I ever bought from Paper Moon Vintage. So, and it's been with me ever since. But it's stuff like that where, like, you know, sometimes articles of pieces of your clothing could become hashtag menswear. You know, like Gurkha's pants and shorts are hashtag menswear. You know, coming out
safari
of
jackets, which we brought up earlier. That's very hashtag menswear.
You know, or 3-roll,
like...
3-roll 2 sport coats, hashtag menswear. You know, and those are things that are highbrow hashtag menswear. But like also like if I had like one good example of something that skirts both is Drake's came out with like a paraboot version, like their own house style paraboot of the penny loafer style, but it was like in a tan. And it's like, the paraboot itself is not hashtag menswear, lowbrow, but the color is. And so, like, even if it was different enough, like, I talked with my good friend Rory about this, and Rory likes tan penny loafers, and it's like I can't avoid the connotations of the hashtag menswear. Like, even if it's different, even though there's a chunky
it looks
sole
too much
there,
like a men's warehouse shopping like intern, or just like guy, you know, you see on the street with a lanyard outside like a big hospital or government office or something.
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
slim pants and the brown or the tan shoes.
Right. See, so it's, you know, it's one of those things where it doesn't really, it just, it's always on a spectrum. It's always on how you look at things and developing that eye.
I genuinely want to know why tan shoes became like the default color of men's dress shoes. I want to know how that happened.
Well, I think it's because, I don't know if we have time. We don't have time for this, but like it's like black shoes were so de facto, and so it's like it's kind of like why white pants have always been like the coolest pants to wear for menswear. It's like because they're just not dark, like they're just not that, you know. So that's kind of it. But there's a couple of other small stuff that we could maybe go for, like high rise and also like wide leg are kind of things that we throw out a lot, and those are things that are incredibly subjective to how you wear them and what your body type is like.
Yeah, people do sometimes message us like, oh, what rise do you wear, or like what's your leg opening? But it's like it's one of those, again, it even kind of depends on like the garment, like what the weight of the fabric is, like how it's gonna like drape and hang on your body. All that stuff that could affect the proportions, how you want to get everything done.
Also, like the word like no break also means a variety of different things to people. Like a lot of like I would say my pants don't break as much as Jason's pants don't break, but his pants are more cropped, while to him it probably doesn't seem like a crop. Maybe to him like a capri pants a crop, you know. So there's a lot of like nuance there. Like it's not always down to hard measurements. The biggest thing, I think I've talked about this either on the podcast or the stream, is where I asked my friend Raj, who is 5'5" and is like 100 pounds. He is a tiny man and very skinny. I said, hey Raj, I love how your pants look. What is your leg opening? And he goes, oh yeah, they're 6.5 inches. I go, sick, I'm going to go to my tailor and get that. And you can imagine me as a 160 pound, 5'8" man, wearing a trouser that has a 6.5 inch leg opening. That does not translate. On him, it was just it wasn't wide, but it was like straight leg. On me, it was like leggings, man. Like it was just, you know. And so when we say this stuff like wide leg or high rise, we kind of just eyeball it. I mean, there are things that kind of help you out. Like a wide leg typically is over 8 inches at the very least. You know, most jeans themselves are about 7 to 7.5. So if it looks wider than a jean, it's probably wide leg. Of course, if you have bigger thighs, like a wide leg from like Banana Republic or J. Crew would probably look more like a straight leg, you know?
Uh-huh. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways, not to extend this topic too long, but there's a lot of different ways to do the wide leg, of course, because there's a completely straight leg, which, you know, we've talked about you have on like military chinos sometimes when it's just like a tube, or you can have like a you know, bell bottom, or you can have, or you can have like a tailored wide leg where there is some taper and some like, you know, change in like measurements, but it's like it's subtle. It's supposed to mimic that like completely straight like tube shape, but of course it has a little bit more complexity than that.
Yeah, exactly. I think at least with high rise, you can look at the length of the fly and be like, okay, well that looks long, so I'm assuming that's high rise.
Here's the other thing I'll say. There are some pants that are like high rise, but they have a short fly. That always just like looks weird. Even if it's high rise, if the fly isn't right, I'd say pass.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't look good. I know. I'm sure you guys. I think we talked about this in like the custom menswear essay and a podcast where like sometimes some makers just don't do it because they're not used to it. So sometimes won't be able to avoid it. But if you can, like a longer fly is always better. Like a good example, I think, are like my or the example of the bad one is like my wide leg, my wide leg pleated chinos from Uniqlo that I raw hemmed. They are high waisted, but the fly is definitely not super long, like compared to like my Ralph Lauren pants from the 80s or whatever. So again, those things are something you just have to kind of eyeball and kind of figure out, just like with the rest of it. What is hashtag menswear? What is vintage? And then lastly, I mean, I thought maybe we could think about like what do terms that you and I use that are specific to us, other than slouchy, because there is already a podcast of that topic where, and in that one too, we also have no idea what that means, and we say it depends on the context and how you're wearing the stuff. I don't know. Do we have anything else that's kind of off repeated, Spencer?
The problem is like any of the terms that we use, it's just like all noise to me. It's like it doesn't even like, and I mean, it's like none of these things even register as like our thing anymore, just because it's, you know, it's just how we talk about clothes.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the big thing too. Like I think kind of subscribing and trying to figure out like, oh, well, this is the right way to talk about it. Like that's not really the point of this. The point was to hopefully kind of explain what our thought process is in how we talk about it. And sometimes, just like with like, you know, with music or whatever, there is a reoccurring idea that kind of ties everything together narratively. Like I think clearly here, the idea isn't that Spencer and I are super ignorant, but it's that we literally take solace in the fact that we don't know, and so we kind of use the same words to kind of describe what we like. We kind of have a very emotional connection that we can latch onto that makes it feel familiar, but that can still be applied to things that we haven't tried yet. You know, like
like and I mean, I think
yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing is this really comes down to like your specific POV, and I guess maybe all the terms that are just for us, we've already like made episodes about.
Exactly.
But it's again, you have to like remember that we are, you know, guys who came from like vintage collecting, and so as we've said in the POV episode or in the vintage episode, like we have a weird thing where everything is filtered like through the entire history of 20th century menswear.
Yeah.
So we can't see it. We can't see anything on its own. It's just like it's like the whole history.
It's a cursed view, you know.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like yeah, as we talked about, like with niche vintage, like you know, when people say, "Oh yeah, that's like this," I'm like, "Nah, man, I've seen that before. I've seen a version of that in like old Esquire magazines and everything." What I think is interesting is that, you know, what really turned me on to this was, and other than sexy ladies, is like the fact that people, it took a while for me to register that I've used the word slouchy a lot. Like I literally did not know until like the past year that people go like, oh yeah, as Ethan says, calls it such. I'm like, oh, I say that. Like it's crazy. And I mean, it's really cool that people can pick up on these things, and hopefully, again, like I said, like can figure out like the mentality and the philosophy behind it. It's really just, as Spencer said, based on the POV. And so developing that first is like the number one priority you should have. I don't know how you get there, but it's definitely worth it, because it can be tough to kind of enter in any hobby and not know how to talk about it. You know, it's, you have to know a little bit about it, but then it's also good to develop your own language, your own phrases, the way you do it, because I think menswear is unique in the fact that as you wear it, other people can see it. It's not like, you know, collecting Star Wars action figures where, you know, the outside world doesn't see it. Menswear is something that people can see, people can learn, people can ask you, and developing, again, that vocabulary or just the method of speaking about it can help bring other people into it, or help
And
people
it's,
learn something.
I think if you think more deeply about just how you talk about it, as you saw a couple times this episode, it'll help you like develop new ideas, or just it encourages you. If you think about how you talk about it, I think it can help encourage you just to think deeper about menswear, figure out why it is you like certain things, what you're looking for in an outfit, and like into your silhouette and stuff like that.
Exactly. I think, you know, that's kind of the whole theme of style and direction in a nutshell, and a theme of my blog that I've been writing for like almost 6 years, or I guess 6 years now, I guess 2015.
That'd be
But
6 years.
yeah, that's kind of like what I've hoped people have gotten. And I think, as I wrote about in the essay, like who the blog is for, I think the people that do want, or that kind of lash on to thinking things introspectively, are the prime candidates for who learns the most from this. And I think also that many of you guys listening to this probably do have something you think about that stuff with. You know, like maybe you think about music the same way, or like sports somehow, or like or art or something, or movies. I think is a good example. I mean, that's kind of like that's kind of like the thing that Spence and I can relate it to the most, just because, you know, we watch movies and we like to talk about them, which unfortunately you guys only get to hear every once in a while. It's because movies are a lot of work and we have to find the time to watch it and blah blah blah. But maybe 2022, man, we're gonna run out of menswear topics eventually, and this is gonna be a fucking
maybe we'll reach a point where it's like we don't need to have like 30,000 images for this one movie.
Exactly. I don't.
Or
have
we
to
could
write
just like
about
talk
it.
about we could just even like talk about movies, not even about the clothes. Like I could just like say things about.
Yeah,
movies.
again, you're locked in. We're gonna make you fall in love with us, and then you're gonna stick with us with any content that we do. So
It's called Stockholm Syndrome. We invented it. Look it up.
I'm Dr. Stockholm.
I'm Dr. Stockholm. And I'm actually Dr. Syndrome.
Dr. Syndrome.
Yeah, we got Dr. Stockholm and Dr. Syndrome together at last.
Can someone please draw those characters?
That's the fan art I want. Well,
That's
it's
what
us.
yeah,
like,
I know.
I'm Dr. Syndrome. You're Dr. Stockholm.
Yeah.
I want like the villain like versions of us, like the villain duo.
Yeah, the opposites, like black lab coats. And I want it to be like, you know, like the 50s doctors where they have like that like headband with the mirror on top. Like I want that. That's what I want. Peter, if you're whoever. Okay, I swear, if you draw this, I will feature this. I will post it on my main account. Okay, I'll do it. You have a promise here. Okay, like I'm not.
Yeah, I'll post any.
Yeah.
I'll post any fan art we get, unless we get. I guess I'll say. I mean, I'm not super worried about this at this point, but if we start getting an unreasonable amount of fan art, I don't think I should be held to posting all of it. But
Once in a while, right? Once in a while.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I mean, I don't know, none of you guys asked for it, but too bad,
I
because you're
feel like
locked
at least
in.
one person asked
Yeah.
for, "Hey, what does this word mean?"
Yeah, or what do you guys consider to be tailoring? But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys learned something and that you can apply it and start using it, you know, on the daily, because this is how we've been able to wear the clothes that we wear. We wear it, you know, with context, free from context. We wear 70s Well, Spencer's outfit, the one I used a lot as an example, where he's wearing like World War II dungarees, a '60s sack jacket, and like a bucket hat with chukka boots. It's like, oh, it looks '70s, even though the pieces are not necessarily '70s.
I mean, that's that's my favorite thing to do. Is like approximate like '60s, '70s looks with older vintage. If you had to like, that's like I guess my POV.
And my POV, remember, is to use like to look like an apparel arts illustration, but with a mixture of contemporary and vintage menswear. And so, again, this is because we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. It means we can wear whatever the fuck we want and say it works. Okay, like that's the secret, guys. That's literally, we're giving you the secret sauce to dressing like Spencer and Ethan, and this is why there is no sad core. Because there is not a coherent look so far.
Yeah,
but
it's just a way of thinking.
Exactly. It makes us better than Throwing Fits, actually. So, take that, Lawrence.
No disrespect to Throwing Fits.
JK, please have that beer with me when I go visit you in New York.
Yeah, it's a good podcast. I've been listening to them. I mean, I've listened to them for a while, but I've ran out of... Not to say that I've listened to them because I've ran out of other things. But I've been going into work more frequently, so I've been listening to them a lot on my commute.
And I've been working out clearly, and so wearing them, listening to them while I work out is pretty cool because it's like another excuse since I don't drive as much. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys liked it. If you guys want to join the conversation and maybe inspire a couple of future podcast episodes, why don't you go to patreon.com/downdirection. And $5 a month gets you access to our exclusive Discord.
That's right.
The best Discord in the world. Better than SoCal Asian Interactive.
Best menswear community in the whole world.
That's right. Best
awesome.
community in the whole world. It's going to be the fucking continent, dude. Come on.
Yeah.
One door.
It's good. One room.
One room, one door. One menswear. But yeah, it's a really great place. We do video games in there. Lots of great shopping links. That's probably where you get the money back, I think, because you can do the shopping links and the marketplace, but also really great discussions, which inspire a lot of what we talk about in the podcast.
Exactly.
An extra $5, so a total of $10. Doesn't get you anything extra other than me saying your name. So big thank you to Austin Milat, Shane Curry, Philip Gagard, Audrey Jessica, Jeremy Ostreicher, Jarrett Colian, and James Devanzo. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being a top tier patrons. Hopefully that was worth the extra $5, and hopefully you think.
Hope so.
You, the audience, think it's worth the extra $5. We stream on Twitch every Wednesday and Sunday at 8:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Video games on Wednesday, random menswear topics on Sundays. Get to hear MJ coming on mic, other than the bonus episode, which is also a feature of the Patreon. We got a lot of stuff happening for the next couple of months before we take our break in December. And I think I'm spreading this on Spencer. I think the new format is we do episodes for 3 months and take a break on the 4th month. That way we still have July and December off. So
there you go.
I think that'll be the best way so we don't get stale too. Let's just do stuff.
Like bread.
That's right. So new era of Style and Direction, everybody. Again, join in the stuff. The patrons make this happen. Not just with the topics, but with the money to MJ. Don't get on mic and everything. I'm Ethan M. Wong.
I'm Spencer DSO.
Follow us on Instagram at Style and Direction, all spelled out. Zedhead Sunday. Submit your outfits. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.